At some point, a terrifying virus began to spread among the population. Those infected became bloodthirsty, losing all sense of reason. The infection spread at an alarming rate, and in no time, it had taken over the entire world. To stop the virus and wipe out the infected who had turned into zombies, governments around the world were forced to use nuclear weapons. But even that wasn't enough to stop the outbreak. Most of the land had already fallen to the undead, and the few human survivors had no choice but to live in designated safe zones. Even then, zombie attacks were still a constant threat, and with supplies running dangerously low, many survivors perished from hunger and desperation. But then, years later, scientists developed a breakthrough, a new type of plant known as the X-gene crop. Just a small piece of it was enough to make a person feel full, and more importantly, it could suppress the spread of the virus inside the body. However, the plant was extremely difficult to cultivate, and so far, only one experimental facility had managed to grow it successfully. To get these life-saving plants to other survivor camps, a new kind of profession emerged, the riders. These riders traveled across the most dangerous regions, delivering essential supplies while dodging constant zombie attacks. One wrong move, and they could become the next victims. Although the man immediately injected himself with the medication, his infection was still detected by his teammates. His wristband displayed 100%, which meant he was about to turn. Sure enough, black blood began to spill from his mouth. With a single gunshot, the man collapsed before he could fully transform. Fa was one of the riders. When the zombie outbreak first began, her boyfriend, Park, had stayed behind at the camp to protect her, using his own body to block the incoming undead. She had watched helplessly as he was torn apart. The pain was unbearable, and after arriving at the survivor camp, she made a firm decision. She would join the riders, and she would show no mercy to the undead. After dealing with their infected teammate, Fa and her crew arrived at a research lab. Their mission was to retrieve a newly developed virus serum from inside. But the lab was a complete massacre. Bodies were scattered everywhere, and not a single person was left alive. The serum was nowhere to be found. Hoping to salvage something useful, Fa decided to take the lab's research data. But when she opened the storage case, she found it empty. The documents were missing, and even the communication radio had vanished without a trace. Luckily, she managed to find a black external hard drive. The condition of the shelter was clearly not due to a zombie attack. While Fa was deep in thought, the sudden sound of a gunshot snapped her back to reality. She and her teammate quickly took cover behind some debris, but the enemy didn't continue firing. Instead, they turned and fled. The gunshots soon drew the attention of nearby zombies, and they charged toward the two of them. With no choice, they had to fight their way through while retreating. Although the zombies were incredibly fierce, both Fa and her teammate had received specialized training. Thanks to their synchronized teamwork, they managed to break through the horde. After finding a car in the parking lot, they quickly drove through the zombie swarm and made it back to the base. The base was heavily guarded, and everyone entering had to undergo a wristband scan. As the virus spread, shelter after shelter fell to the zombies, and no safety risk could be tolerated. Upon hearing that Fa and her team hadn't found the serum, the base commander's expression grew increasingly grim. The Shelter Fast team had been to was humanity's last research base. Not long ago, the commander had received word that a special serum had been developed there. When combined with the X-plant, it could effectively suppress the zombie virus. He immediately ordered Fa, the top rider, to lead a team and retrieve it. But unexpectedly, in just 2.5 hours, that research base had mysteriously fallen. Without the special serum, the cure for the zombie virus couldn't be created, and the extinction of humanity was just a matter of time. Just as the commander was feeling utterly hopeless, he discovered a shocking secret hidden in the hard drive Fa had retrieved from the lab. Without hesitation, he rushed to the van that Fa and her teammate had driven back. When he pulled open the door, he found an infected person locked inside. At the same time, chaos suddenly erupted within the base. A rider who had just returned from outside had concealed the fact that he had been bitten by a zombie. Terrified of death, he injected himself with a massive dose of suppressant drugs and barely managed to pass the wristband scan. But now, his body could no longer withstand it. He had fully transformed. The newly turned zombie went on a rampage, attacking the other survivors. The virus spread at an alarming rate. By the time the alarms blared, a large number of people inside the base had already turned into zombies. With the base on the verge of collapse, Fa and her teammate rushed to find the commander, urging him to escape with them. But he shook his head, refusing their offer. Slowly, he lifted his shirt, revealing a horrifying bite wound on his chest. He had already been bitten in the chaos. Knowing there was no turning back, He endured the pain and handed Fa a hard drive, giving her one final mission. No matter what happens, she must get the infected person in the van to safety, because that person was the key to developing the cure. Fa didn't want to give up, but she knew time was running out. In the end, she and her teammates sped away in the van and escaping the base. Their destination was a safe zone in the north, where a laboratory was equipped with the tools needed to study the antibody. However, reaching it wouldn't be easy. They had to pass through several dangerous towns. To avoid the massive zombie swarms, Fa made a bold decision to take the back roads and bypass the cities. In the apocalypse, everyone knew the wilderness was relatively safer than the cities. But ironically, it was human presence that made the wilderness even more dangerous. As they drove through a dense forest, they suddenly encountered a massive tree blocking the road. Fa got out to check, but before she could react, a dark figure lunged out from the shadows. She was instantly taken hostage. Her teammate dared not make any sudden moves and had no choice but to surrender. The bandits rummaged through their supplies and were thrilled to find their backpacks filled with precious explants. Their excitement grew even more when one of them popped open the van's trunk, expecting more valuables. That's when they noticed a sealed container inside. Thinking it was packed with resources, their leader eagerly pried it open. But the moment the lid lifted, everyone froze in terror. Inside was a person, and what was even more horrifying, on his wrist was a scanner displaying his infection level, 50%. Before the bandits could react, the man inside the box suddenly exploded into action, knocking all of them to the ground in a matter of seconds. With the danger finally over, Fa took a closer look at the man's face. To her shock, the person standing before her was none other than her boyfriend from before the apocalypse, Park. When the disaster first broke out, Park had sacrificed himself to protect her, using his own body to block a swarm of zombies. Fa had watched in horror as countless zombies tore into Park. She had always believed he had died that day. Yet now, here he was. Fa, overwhelmed with emotion, called out his name. But Park remained expressionless, showing no recognition of her at all. No matter how much she called to him, he couldn't remember her. All he remembered was being captured by a group of masked people and having a tracker bracelet put on him. Everything else was a blank. Not wanting to risk more bandits showing up, Fa knew they couldn't stay there. She made the decision to continue their journey. She hoped that once they reached the northern safe zone and conducted further research, perhaps they would finally uncover the truth behind everything. After traveling for some time, the three finally arrived at an abandoned shelter. While they didn't find much useful supplies, they were lucky enough to come across a barrel of gasoline. Just as Din was about to refuel the car, a four-wheel drive vehicle suddenly skidded to a stop in front of them. Before Din could figure out what was happening, the vehicle emitted a deafening sonic wave. The loud noise immediately attracted a swarm of zombies, which came rushing toward them. Din was trapped inside the driver's seat, completely surrounded by the undead. Fa kept firing her gun, but the number of zombies was overwhelming. It was impossible to take them all down. At that moment, Park, now a half-infected, stepped forward. His emotions ran high, and as a result, his virus levels spiked again. If his infection reached 100%, he would fully transform into a zombie. Since they hadn't managed to refuel the car, it eventually broke down while passing through a wooded area. With no other choice, they had to continue on foot. Fortunately, they only needed to climb over this mountain to reach their destination. However, as they entered the woods, they suddenly encountered a large group of zombies. Strangely, these zombies were standing still, unmoving, as if they were in a dormant state. Fa intended to activate the sound system left by previous riders to lure the zombies away, but to her surprise, the system malfunctioned and emitted a loud, piercing noise. The dormant zombies were instantly triggered, and they began to charge toward the group, snarling and clawing at the air. Fa was knocked into a tree by one of the zombies, and it looked like she was about to be torn apart. Just in time, Park rushed in from the side and blocked the fatal bite. However, this act caused Park's virus level to spike once again. If it wasn't controlled soon, he would completely turn into a zombie. After spending this time together, it seemed that Park had regained some of his memories, recalling moments from his past with Fa. As Fa dreamed of working with Park to develop a vaccine and save humanity, little did she know, this would be their last sweet moment together. The next day, the three of them finally reached the northern shelter. What was once humanity's greatest hope had now completely fallen. The inside was covered in blood, but there were no signs of survivors. As they ventured further into the shelter, they encountered a horde of dormant zombies. The trio hoped to slip away unnoticed, but then a sudden noise startled the zombies. The sleeping monsters were instantly awakened, and they began to charge at the group. With no time to waste, they opened fire, but the sheer size of the zombie horde and their unfamiliarity with the shelter's layout left them trapped. There was no escape in sight. In that critical moment, Din stepped forward. Determined to buy time for the others to escape, he bravely blocked the laboratory door with his body. As the zombies surged in like a tidal wave, Din was torn apart in an instant. Fa rushed into the laboratory, desperately trying to find survivors, but instead, she discovered the tragic truth about the shelter's downfall in the computer. It turned out that one of the scientists, in an attempt to speed up the serum research, had used live humans for experiments. Unfortunately, the experiments failed, turning the subjects into zombies, which spread quickly throughout the shelter. Those defenseless scientists were soon torn apart, becoming nothing more than zombie prey. At that moment, several zombies suddenly burst into the room. To protect Fa, Park engaged in a fierce battle with them. However, the continuous bites caused Park's virus levels to rise once again. Although the zombies were eventually eliminated, the reading on the monitor strapped to Park's wrist had already reached 99%. Realizing that he was about to fully transform into a zombie, Park refused to harm Fa. He locked himself in a room behind an iron door, took a syringe, and drew a sample of his own blood. He handed it to Fa, urging her to take it and find other shelters. He believed that with his blood, a serum could still be created. Though Fa's heart ached in agony, as a writer, she understood the weight of the responsibility she carried. Humanity's last hope rested on her shoulders. She had no choice but to continue her journey into the unknown.